We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. It is Sunday. We're in the middle of the weekend. Not a lot of new stuff happening. It usually doesn't start till maybe midday Monday. We start hearing about some things. No doubt there'll be some crazy shit coming up this coming week. We know we've got the debate with the Republican Party, a debate that Donald Trump says he's not showing up for. We'll talk more about that. And of course, all 19 co-defendants, including Donald Trump, have to surrender in Fulton County at the Fulton County Jail by next Friday. So this should all be very interesting this week. We'll see a lot of activity in Georgia and in Milwaukee, too, where they're going to have this debate. Of course, we'll be talking about all of that as it happens and any crazy shit that happens around it. If it involves Republicans, you can almost be guaranteed that some crazy shit will occur. Now, we're going to start off this podcast with emails, but it's not the typical kind of emails. I don't have any of the normal emails, but I have some little notes that are sent to me by Lisa. You remember she was on the program a couple of times when I was in Georgia the last time. And while I was in Georgia, it was harder for me to keep track of what was going on the news. And Lisa was so kind to keep an eye on some things and send me notes as she found something out, which she did. She's continuing to do it to a certain extent. It's not as necessary because now I can watch what's going on, but I do appreciate her help. It saves me time and it's much appreciated. So I have a few notes that she sent to me yesterday to give me a heads up on certain things. Starts out with Trump posted that there will be a civil war if I'm convicted. Mike, this has gone on long enough, and I couldn't agree more. It's interesting about Donald Trump. You never heard him talk about civil war up until the Trump-a-fuck started talking about the civil war. Now he's trying to incite them to do what they've been talking about. Unfortunately for Donald Trump, the Trump-a-fucks are a lot of talk and no action. And we know this because every time Donald Trump gets indicted, he's out there trying to incite these motherfuckers, and everybody is worried that they're going to show up and there's going to be some violence. But every time, that's not the case. And that's got to be disappointing for Donald Trump. But the fact of the matter is that we're dealing with a bunch of cowards. They have a much different situation now than they did on January 6th of 2021. Donald Trump is not in office and there to protect them. They are likely to run into some serious pushback, maybe some lethal action, and we might very well have a bunch more Ashley Babbitts, and they all know that. So that's why they're not showing up. Now, Lisa goes on to say, I'm praying that his base has gotten a few brain cells and decides civil war is not in their best interest. His rants are going to get people killed. He needs to be remanded immediately. We're already a violent country, sadly. Mass shootings, murders, and just plain mean violence-loving people. Trump is fueling that fire and must be stopped. These judges need to stop babying him and throw his diapered butt in a cell pending trial. Now, Lisa. And I agree with you, Lisa. Something does have to be done. You know, for a long time now, we've been brushing aside all these things that Donald Trump has done. And I've always wondered, what are you waiting for? What level are you waiting for him to cross before you start holding him responsible? And I think we might be at that tipping point now, especially with Judge Chutkan in Washington, D.C. She has yet to do anything. I understand that. But I have to believe that something is going to be done or talked about anyway on August 28th when they get together to decide the trial date. I have a feeling it's going to be a lot quicker than Donald Trump and his lawyers would like. She did warn them that if Donald Trump kept talking, that would cause the trial to be quicker. Well, he kept talking, and she has the right to pick out any particular date. Now, Jack Smith has suggested January 2nd, and of course, Donald Trump's people suggested April of 2026, which is ridiculous. It's insulting. So she's not going to listen too much to Donald Trump's side. I don't know that she'll side completely with Jack Smith, but it will certainly be closer to Jack Smith's state than Donald Trump's state. But now is the time. The other intangible we have at this point is Georgia. We know how tough Fani Willis is, and we hear this young judge that's going to be handling the case in Georgia is legitimate and substantial. What Donald Trump is doing down in Georgia is a couple of problems for him. First of all, the people he might be threatening or making accusations of and calling names and that sort of stuff could very well blend over into Jack Smith's case. And if it does that, then Judge Chutkan is going to have something to say about it. But I think what's going to happen in Georgia is going to be much tougher on Donald Trump than anything we've seen thus far. Fani Willis isn't going to back off. I have a feeling this judge might be fair and decent, which is good. And I don't even really know what the rules are in Georgia. Some people keep saying that if you're charged with a RICO crime, there is no bail. Now, this is what we know about Donald Trump and his lawyers. They're going down early in the week, presumably to negotiate a bail deal or whatever else they want to work out. I don't know that Georgia is going to be all that accommodating. They're going to, of course, want him not to be mugshot. They're going to want him not to be handcuffed. And I don't know that they can stop that. I don't think they can. I mean, Judge Chutkan said what this judge will probably say too. Whatever you've got going outside of this courtroom is secondary to what we're doing here. And in here, you're nothing more than another defendant in a criminal trial. And if they hold true to that, then there will be some accountability. And I suspect we will see some of that accountability from Georgia and Washington, D.C. with Judge Chutkan. I'm not sure to what extent. I think if he keeps pushing it, he might get the ultimate punishment by being put in jail or remanded in jail. But we'll see if he has the courage to keep pushing it. He says he will. His lawyers say he will. But Donald Trump at heart is a coward too. So he's not going to want to pay any more consequences than he absolutely has to. Next up, Lisa talks about a new video just discovered from Alex Jones's body cam at the Capitol on January 6th. She says he's so egotistical he wore a body cam at the insurrection. Well, Lisa, I think it was partially egotistical, but secondly, because he does a TV podcast type of thing, he wanted footage for the show as well. Now, the DOJ found out and got the body cam from him. So they now have what's on that footage, which is probably pretty damning. Now, on it is a gentleman by the name of Kenneth Chesbro in a MAGA hat rooting on Psycho Jones. As you know, Mr. Chesbro has been indicted. Yeah. Kenneth, is it Chesbro or Cheesebro? Who cares? But he's one of the 6 unindicted co-conspirator from Jack Smith's indictment of Donald Trump. Now, just because he's unindicted at this point doesn't mean that he will ultimately be on indictment. He will no doubt be indicted, especially this Kenneth Chesbro. He's the guy, one of the people that they're suggesting that has been or was the architect for the coup or the overturning of the election and overthrowing of the government. So they've got this guy's number, but he's a lawyer, you know, and when you see him now, he's in a suit, he's kind of a muckety muck, and you think, okay, he's just one of the administrative people who did the underhanded things. But when this video came out, we realized he's just another crazy fuck like the rest. And he was there on January 6th. Now, whether he's culpable for anything he did on January 6th, I don't know. But This certainly doesn't help much, and it certainly doesn't lend too well to his credibility. So we'll see what happens with Kenneth Cheesebro. She finishes up by saying Donald is losing what's left of his teeny tiny brain and is posting some wild stuff. That's just a few. Okay, my friend, this is going to be a wild weekend, I'm afraid. Well, it wasn't quite as wild as you might have thought, but still plenty of things going on. And she signed off by saying, Lisa and Emma. Emma apparently is the greatest service dog in the world, and I don't doubt it. I love me some dogs. I can't have a dog where I live right now, but I've had dogs all my life. I love my dogs, and I will stop to pet any dog on the street. And I know it pisses my wife off when I do that because you don't just walk up to dogs, and I don't. We had a little learning lesson with my granddaughter, who also loves to hug dogs, any dog. She'll walk up to any. She's not afraid of anything. And we walked up to one lady, and she had a dog, and I was about to say something. And this lady taught her a lesson. She told my granddaughter listened very intently, and I think she remembered it and will use it in the future. She told my granddaughter, she said, the first thing you ask, is your dog friendly? And I will tell you, yes, my dog is friendly. And then you ask, is it okay if I pet your dog? And then I say, yes, it's okay to pet my dog. And then you can go over and pet my dog. And the lady says, do you understand that? And my granddaughter says, uh-huh. And then the lady says, well, go ahead and pet the dog. And she went over, hugged him, kissed him, petted him, and all that stuff. Hopefully she remembers that. That's good advice, not only for children, but for adults. For me, ask if the dog is friendly and ask if it's okay to pet them. You never know with dogs, and you know, dogs are really subject to how they're raised. And so it's always better to ask. And I'm sure Emma is the greatest service dog in the world. Lisa, thank you for the tips and the heads up. I appreciate it immensely. Now, the first thing we're going to talk about has nothing to do with politics. Well, it kind of does. It has to do with climate change. You know, that shit that Republicans tell us doesn't really exist. There's no climate change. Yet we've got fires in Hawaii. And now we're looking at the possibility of a hurricane in Southern California. How rare is that? Well, the last time it happened was, I think, 89 years ago, the last time. And now all of a sudden we've got what they thought was going to be a Category 4 hurricane coming up the Mexican coast into the Los Angeles area. It may be hitting San Diego. The last report I heard is that it was downgraded to a 2, but that doesn't mean it can't pick up speed again. Nonetheless, it's going to be a dangerous situation, and I think it's first supposed to make land later today or tonight, and possibly tomorrow. So we'll be watching that very closely. Governor Gavin Newsom on Saturday proclaimed a state of emergency for a large portion of Southern California as the state prepares for this historic hurricane. And it's expected to cause some extreme rain and flooding. And I read someplace where they're talking about getting as much rain in this short period as they might normally get in 1 year, which is saying a lot because we're talking about a lot of desert land, and this stuff does not get absorbed like if it were some more grassy or greener area. This stuff may not seep into the ground as quickly, which means the flooding will be worse. Now, the governor said there are more than 7,500 boots on the ground already deployed to help protect from the impact of Hurricane Hilary, according to the release from his office. Today, Governor Gavin Newsom proclaimed a state of emergency for much of Southern California to support Hurricane Hilary response and recovery efforts as the state continues to mobilize and coordinating resources ahead of the storm's forecasted impacts starting today, the release read. This is pretty concerning. I mean, if you're talking about this hitting San Diego and or Los Angeles, there's a lot of people there, a lot of people. The storm, which may pour more than a year's worth of rain on parts of the Southwest, weakened from a Category 3 storm to a Category 2 storm on Saturday as it advanced toward California, according to the National Hurricane Center. The storm is still a major hurricane, moving with maximum sustained winds of 110 miles per hour. Now, the storm is sped up and is moving faster than expected, now moving at 17 miles per hour, and is currently located maybe 500 miles southeast of San Diego. Hilary is expected to continue to weaken as it moves north-northwest through the cooler waters towards Southern California. Now, residents in the Southwest are bracing for catastrophic and life-threatening flooding, as the system is expected to hit the region as a rare tropical storm with the harshest impacts expected today into tomorrow. Flooding rain from the storm will start to arrive well in advance of Hilary's core of stronger winds, and these winds could arrive as soon as Sunday morning, this morning, along with more prolific and dangerous rainfall, according to the National Hurricane Center. And obviously, it's going to affect San Diego. It's going to affect Los Angeles, all the smaller towns in between. But I'm seeing where flash flooding could extend out as far as Palm Springs, lovely town. I've been there a couple of times. Great place. I can't wait to go back. Our prayers are with the people on the West Coast, Los Angeles, San Diego, the smaller towns, and Palm Springs. I'm even seeing that they could be looking at some flash flooding in Las Vegas, which is quite a distance away. That's not necessarily from storm surge, but when you get the kind of rain that they're talking about getting, and you've got desert grounds that aren't going to soak up the water, that could pose some serious threats and some serious problems. Unfortunately, the only thing we can do is sit back and watch. I mean, those people in California, the governor and the 7,500 people on the ground are going to do all they can, but it's a dangerous situation. There's going to be a lot of people struggling. I think we should be thinking about them, praying for them, and when it's over, we should be ready to do whatever is necessary to assist them. I'm sure we will. I'm sure the Biden administration will respond accordingly. But this is a scary time for folks on the West Coast. Brace yourselves. Do what you've got to do to either get out of there or bunker down and be safe. Be safe. And as I told you yesterday, if you're going to be staying in the area when the storm hits, do not get in your car. That is the least safest place to be if you're in the middle of the storm and with flash flooding. All right, now there's a story out, and there was an article written in the Atlantic magazine. And the two men that wrote this article are law professors of note, Lawrence Tribe and Michael Luttig, former federal appellate judge and prominent conservative who's become a strong critic of Trump's actions after the election. Now, in this article, what they basically have said is that based on the Constitution, and you'll find nobody who knows more about the Constitution than these two gentlemen. They are the epitome of experts of the Constitution. But according to them, without a trial, without a conviction, now as it stands, Donald Trump should be barred from the presidency because of his actions to overturn the previous presidential election. Now, the latest salvo came on Saturday, again from Lawrence Tribe and Michael Luttig, former federal appellate judge and prominent conservative. You see Lawrence Tribe on television a lot. He's there to give input, advice, and information. Michael Ludwig, you might remember, this is the expert that Mike Pence went to when Donald Trump asked him not to certify the Electoral College. He apparently went to Michael Ludwig and said, "You're the expert. Can I even do this?" Michael Ludwig said, "You can't do that. That's ridiculous." And Mike Pence should have known that, but he was looking for an angle, a way to appease Donald Trump because he's a pussy ass bitch. Now, not all of the legal community agree, and what the scholars are proposing, you would need to test in court. A lot of people are hearing this story and they're getting very excited about it. Oh my God, we found a way, it's going to happen. And all I have to say is not so fast, because this is untested. Not all people agree with it. But what I find amazing is we have all these Republicans that keep talking about constitutional originalists. You know, what the Constitution says, we stick to it. The only problem with Republicans is they read what the Constitution says and then they make up what it means. And therein lies the problems. Now, Ludwig and Tribe's writings capture a conversation about the Constitution and the 2021 insurrection that is likely to grow. And this is why this was good. This starts the conversation and it will grow over time. And based on what they've said, and since they are the epitome of the experts of the Constitution, I tend to believe them more than, say, Tucker Carlson or even somebody on MSNBC. Now, they and others base their arguments on a reading of part of the 14th Amendment. There's a post-Civil War provision that excludes from future office anyone previously as a sworn-in public official engaged in insurrection or rebellion or had given aid to comfort to the enemies of the government, which Donald Trump certainly has. I mean, he's as much as said that if he became president again, he would pardon all the insurrectionists. And in spite of what the Republicans say, it was, in fact, a fucking insurrection. Now, the pair wrote, having thought long and deeply about the text, history, and purpose of the 14th Amendment's disqualification clause for much of our professional careers, both of us conclude some years ago that, in fact, a conviction would be beside the point. So what they're saying is just because he's convicted, that isn't the thing they need to get this 14th Amendment enacted. They're totally separate things. In the Constitution, it doesn't suggest anything about legal procedures or convictions. They go on to say the former president's efforts to overturn the 2020 presidential election and the resulting attack on the U.S. Capitol place him squarely within the ambit of the disqualification clause, and he is therefore ineligible to serve as president ever again. Well, that sounds good to me. Let's get that done. Tribe expanded on his message in a joint interview with Ludwig on CNN Saturday evening, calling it a monumental issue, the most important constitutional issue of the day. Now, Lawrence Tribe told CNN's Jim Acosta, stay tuned. This is going to be a saga that lasts between now and the election. Now, Ludwig similarly told CNN their argument is rooted in the actual meaning under the original understanding of the Constitution. Now, while the articles from the legal scholars amount to opinions at this time, that's what they are, as opinions. I mean, these are very learned folks when it comes to the Constitution. Make no mistake, they are still just opinions. It's possible the court systems in various states could be asked to look at Trump's viability as a candidate in 2024, especially if secretaries of state or other officials disqualify Trump from their ballots. So you see what they're saying. There probably isn't a federal law that they can write. Maybe they can. But the most expeditious way is to file suits against Donald Trump being put on the ballot. And then the secretaries of state could make the decision of not putting certain people on the ballot because they feel they're guilty of the violation of the 14th Amendment. And that may be it. I mean, here's the fact. If you want to keep Donald Trump out of office, you don't need to have all 50 states to take him off the ballot. You need some of the swing states, some of the bigger states, and then Donald Trump won't have a chance. If you got 3 swing states, even 2 swing states to sign on to this, he couldn't win. There's just no way. And that'll cause all kinds of problems with the Republicans, of course. They'll be upset about this. But it's about the Constitution. And they're the ones that seem to love the Constitution, especially these Republicans who claim to be originalist. Now, Ludwig and Tribe wrote, the process will play out over the coming year, could give rise to momentary social unrest and even violence. Well, that's going to piss some people off, but so could the failure to engage in the constitutionally mandated process. Previously, advocacy groups used the 14th Amendment to contest the ability of Republican members of Congress, Marjorie Taylor Greene and Madison Cawthorn, to be ballot candidates in 22 because of their vocal support of the Capitol rioters, but judges decided neither could be disqualified. However, one convicted Capitol rioter, Coy Griffin, was removed by a judge from an elected county office in New Mexico. So we'll see what they are ultimately going to do. But I think Lawrence Tribe and Michael Ludwig did the right thing. They started the ball rolling. They started the conversation, and now it'll have to be addressed and looked into, and maybe there'll be some lawsuits, and maybe there will be some states that say, yeah, I'm not putting Donald Trump on the ballot this time. And again, if you got a couple, 3 states that decide to do that, it may make it impossible for Donald Trump to win, even if he won all the other states that he would expect to win. I know a lot of people are worried about Donald Trump running for president and winning the presidency. I keep telling you, and I'll tell you again, it's not going to happen. Donald Trump cannot win the presidency. He just doesn't have the support. He didn't have the support in 2020 and lost by 7 million votes. The support he has now is far less than what he had in 2020, far less than what he had in 2016. And the other problem Donald Trump has is money. He has less money than he had in 2020. And the cash flow is waning. He's having to steal from Peter to pay Paul regarding his legal fees. He's having to take from his PACs to pay his legal fees. He's really got no choice but to pay his legal fees. He's in quite a fix here with 4 indictments, 91 felony charges. If he quits paying his lawyers and they say, fuck it, we're gone, well, Donald Trump's going to be in a lot of trouble, or dealing with help from the government to pay for a lawyer. And that's not going to be a lawyer who's going to win any case against Jack Smith. Frankly, the lawyers he does have aren't the cream of the crop. They're going to have a hell of a time going up against Jack Smith and his prosecution team. So I suspect that no matter what happens, Donald Trump is not going to do well in these court cases. The facts, the evidence, and the witnesses are all there. Donald Trump doesn't have anything to say about it. The only hope he has is if he wins the presidential election and then pardons himself. And that's not even realistic to think that he can do that. That's something that's never been done and would have to be tested in courts. And then he'd have to win those court cases to actually accomplish it. But as I've said, with all that's going on, Donald Trump just is not going to have the opportunity to run, certainly not win the 2024 election. You think about what's coming up. You've got Manhattan, you've got Florida, you've got Georgia, you've got Washington, D.C. You've got court cases and court appearances here and there and everywhere, and you've got the lawsuits. Donald Trump is going to be a busy motherfucker. He's not going to have the time to mount a campaign, and he certainly isn't going to have the money either. So I'm not too worried about Donald Trump winning the presidency. I don't even think that he'll be the candidate. But I will tell you this, if he does end up being the Republican candidate for the 2024 presidential election, that will be an absolute gift for the Democrats. They can't help but beat Donald Trump. Donald Trump won one time in 2016, and ever since then, he's failed. He's lost. And there's nothing that suggests he has even a prayer to win come 2024. We'll keep an eye on it for you, but I'm going to tell you again, don't worry about this. Donald Trump will not run again, and he will not be the president of the United States ever again. In fact, he'll probably be kicked out of Washington, D.C. anytime he stops in there just for a tourist trip or something. So we'll keep an eye on it for you, and we'll keep you posted. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. So get this. Donald Trump claims he canceled a promised press conference to prove the 2020 election in Georgia had been stolen from him because his lawyers will be presenting that information in court filings. Now, Chris Christie, his rival, has an alternative theory. Chris Christie says he's scared. Yeah, I think he is scared. Chris Christie went on to say he never listens to his lawyers, but he listened this time, didn't he? Christie told reporters Saturday after his appearance at a candidates forum. Why? Because he's scared. He is scared. He's just a couple of steps away from that jail cell closing behind him. Trump's campaign did not respond to an inquiry about whether Trump was in fact worried about potential incarceration. If Donald Trump isn't worried at this point, Donald Trump's absolutely delusional. I mean, at some point in time, you have to look at the facts and use some logic. And with 4 indictments and 91 felony charges, jail has to be crossing your mind from time to time. It certainly would me. Now, Donald Trump is a little bit of a different kind of person. He is a narcissist. He's a sociopath. He's a pathological liar. So maybe he can't comprehend the seriousness of what's ahead for him. But the people around him must be able to do that, and they should try to find some way to convey that to him to get him to calm the fuck down. Now, what Chris Christie didn't suggest is something I suggested on TikTok and in the podcast too. Why Donald Trump canceled his press conference to expose it all and to totally exonerate himself. I think it's fair to say he's scared. There is no question about that. But the only other time that Donald Trump ever listened to his lawyers was back while he was president, when he was going to fire interim Attorney General Rosen and elevate Jeffrey Clark to the Attorney General's job. And what happened then? Well, everybody in the DOJ said, you do that, we're resigning. Everybody, it'll be a mass exodus. And that is the one thing that stopped Donald Trump from making Jeff Clark the Attorney General. And had he done that, God knows where we would be right now. So if that's the one thing that causes him to listen to his lawyers, doesn't it make sense that maybe his lawyers in these upcoming criminal cases are getting a little frustrated? It's a tough enough job defending Donald Trump as it is, but he doesn't need to keep going out and ruining it and giving away evidence and facts and saying crazy shit. So it wouldn't surprise me if his lawyers, frustrated as they must be, said, listen, Donnie, you go do this. We're all fucking quitting. And then, of course, when you're in a position like he's in, being without legal representation is a bit of a problem. Trump has been lying about the 2020 election having been stolen from him through fraud since the wee hours of election night. In fact, he was talking about it before the end of the election. This was before all the votes had even been counted. Some of the most aggressive efforts to overturn that loss came in Georgia. He had a hard on for Georgia, and he was going after them. And so did a lot of people go there to help him or make calls to help him. They tried for weeks to pressure state and local election officials. And that all culminated, of course, in that infamous recorded phone call. You know, the one where Donald Trump said it was a perfect phone call, where he asked Brad Raffensperger to find him 11,780 votes. Yeah, you remember that one. Now, the release of that recording sparked a criminal investigation in Georgia, which has now resulted in racketeering indictment that could bring Trump decades in state prison. Now, Trump responded by promising a press conference where he would release a large, complex, detailed, but irrefutable report on the presidential election fraud, which would require that both the Georgia indictment and federal indictment based on the same actions be dismissed. He would be totally exonerated. But then on Thursday, Trump posted on his social network that, on the advice of his lawyers, the information would instead be presented in court filings. Therefore, the news conference is no longer necessary. I wonder sometimes if Donald Trump really believes his lawyers are going to get him off. Because I'll be perfectly honest with you, I would be surprised if his lawyers think they're going to win this fucking case. How do you become a lawyer? Allegedly learned, experienced, think you're going to win this case. They can't possibly think that. And if Donald Trump doesn't know, they're still trying to keep it from him, to keep him quiet, keep him calm. Now, Christie on Saturday morning laughed at the explanation. He has no evidence. He's trying to distract from the fact that he was charged in a RICO racketeering, influenced, and corrupt organization indictment here. 2 federal indictments and another state indictment in New York, he said. So that's why he's not doing the press conference on Monday. He doesn't have any evidence, and he's scared that if he goes out there and shoots off his mouth like he normally does, that he'll wind up even closer to the jail cell than he is today. I honestly don't know how Donald Trump could screw it up for himself any more than he already has. But still, discretion is the better part of valor. And he probably should keep his mouth shut as much as he doesn't want to. Now, Christie was among 6 of the dozen Republican presidential candidates to appear at radio talk show host Eric Erickson's Gathering Conference, which took place at a hotel barely 8 miles from the Fulton County Jail, where Trump will have to turn himself in, be fingerprinted, and photographed no later than Friday. Georgia's indictment is Trump's 4th indictment. You got to say Donnie is a prolific criminal. Justice Department Special Counsel Jack Smith earlier this month indicted him for conspiring to defraud the United States, to obstruct an official proceeding, etc., etc. So Donald Trump will not be having the press conference tomorrow. Donald Trump was just reacting. It was an emotional thing. He felt like Fani Willis attacked him with the indictments, so he needed to retaliate. And unfortunately, with Donald Trump, he doesn't necessarily have to have any evidence or facts or truth or law or justice or anything in order to attack back. He doesn't think about it to that extent. It's all very, very reactionary. So if somebody strikes out, he strikes back, and he just comes up with whatever he's got in hand or in his mind. I mean, it's not like we've always accused the Republicans of saying, I know you are, but what am I? And that's essentially what Donald Trump did there. And now the Republicans, of course, use that same tactic, and it's so lame, it's so childish, it's almost infantile, but they keep doing it over and over again. Do they not realize how stupid they look when they do this? Or is it that they don't care? Or is it that they've got nothing else, so they're throwing caution to the wind and doing whatever they possibly can? It could be a mixture of all three of those things. Now, Donald Trump, luck isn't real strong these days. In fact, you might say, to quote an old song, an old Ray Charles song, if I didn't have bad luck, I would have no luck at all. Apparently, Donald Trump's legal defense fund website had appeared to have been taken over Friday night by someone who opposes the former president. Visits to the Patriot Legal Defense Fund site set up in recent weeks to help pay mounting legal bills for the former president and his allies were met with an altered homepage, a large banner that says, "Hey, America is already great." An archived version of the same URL shows that this site was previously used to raise funds for Donald Trump. What website does he have that doesn't try to raise funds? Now, this quote is interesting. It says, "In our country, everyone has to follow the rules no matter who they are. Our Constitution, the big rule book of our nation, says that we are all equal. Nobody gets special treatment." The site now reads, "I want to talk a bit about lying. A lie is when someone doesn't tell the truth on purpose. It's like saying you ate an apple when you really ate a cookie. Lying is bad because it breaks trust. Imagine if your friends didn't believe you anymore because you lied a lot. In some cases, like when people lie to the courts or the police, it's just not bad, it's a crime." Now, the site also recommended people not to donate to Donald Trump's legal fund and instead encourages readers to visit the ACLU and other progressive causes. The fund was announced in July. So, Donald Trump and the Republicans are well known for their dirty tricks, and now they are struggling with some of those dirty tricks coming back to impact them. And I suspect we'll see more of this before it's all over. As much as there are some crazy Republicans who might commit some violence, there are some Democrats out there, some radical left liberals, the progressives maybe, that might get a little overzealous and go after websites or what have you. That's not a good thing either, but let's be honest. In the case with Donald Trump, he was already lying on that page. This particular hacker went in and put the truth in there. And I know they'll have troubles with that, but I don't know if that's criminal or not. I mean, they own the website, so apparently the hacking would be illegal. But we're going to see more of this happening. And as the Republicans go and the way they've been going, they've been failing a lot lately. They're not going to be able to keep up with some of the cyber attacks that are going to be sent out toward them. Let's just see what happens. As I've told you all along, the next 16 months are not going to be good ones for the Republican Party. Now, Donald Trump said something yesterday that's a little creepy as far as I'm concerned. You know how much love Donald Trump has expressed for Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un, two murderous dictators, and he loves them. And apparently he believes they love him too. Now, Trump has long been talking about a good relationship he has with the Russian president, Vladimir Putin. He reportedly said in a Fox interview that Putin never would have invaded Ukraine if he had been president, which he probably wouldn't have had to. Donald Trump would have forced Ukraine into handing themselves over. But Donald Trump goes on to say, "I was the apple of his eye," the former president said in an interview. Now, there was a quick response. David Frum, a former speechwriter for President George W. Bush, said, "Helping Trump to become the president was Putin's supreme accomplishment as a dictator." Now, From wrote, a perverse truth here. Helping Trump into the U.S. presidency was Putin's supreme accomplishment as a dictator. A Trump second term would have wrecked NATO from within. With no one to help, Ukraine would have been easy pickings for Putin. And I'm sure Putin would have preferred not to have such a tough time with Ukraine like they're having now if he could have gotten Donald Trump to weaken NATO. Then it would have been an easy thing to walk in and just take what they wanted. And you know that Vladimir Putin would have fucking done that. Now, conservative attorney and Trump critic George Conway also chimed in, calling Trump a Kremlin asset. Now, the whole idea that he called him the apple of his eye. Kremlin asset DJ Trump on his relationship with Vladimir Putin. MSNBC host Mehdi Hassan attempted to put the development in a totally different perspective for those who may not be taking the incident seriously. He said, just imagine if Barack Obama, in any of his 8 years in office, had proudly and publicly referred to himself as the apple of Putin's eye. The right would have had an immediate, nonstop meltdown. Fox would have demanded impeachment and indictment 24/7. Now, presidential historian Michael Beschloss took a more historical approach. Never heard Truman boast of being the apple of Stalin's eye, he said. Ron Flipkowski, a former Republican, had an extremely simple response. Yeah, we know, Putin's most useful idiot, he wrote. And I think that is the most poignant point made there. Donald Trump thinks these people like him. Fact is, they don't like him or any other American at this point. They see America is a hurdle or a stumbling block, and they need to get over it or around it. And they found an easy way to do that by co-opting the President of the United States. Donald Trump was so susceptible to this on a number of ways. First of all, he's got many things in his closet that Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un probably have access to. A little bit of blackmail, and Donald Trump should be familiar with this because that is his MO most of the time. But Vladimir Putin, Kim Jong-un both knew what the facts were. All you had to do was pat this guy on the back, give him a hug, tell him he's a genius, and he will do anything you want. He's an easy sale. I told you this before. I talked about my father, who was a narcissistic, pathological liar, sociopath. And I was always afraid of him. He would lose his temper. He wasn't as physically violent. Occasionally he did some fucked up shit, but he was more verbally abusive. And he would say some horrific things to his children. I didn't know that at the time because I didn't know any better. But when I went out and met other fathers and then became a father myself, I finally realized just how fucked up this guy was. But even though he was that bad, I learned very quickly, because I've always told you that whenever I have a problem, I slow everything down. I look at it from every angle, and I try to figure what the best approach to any problem might be. And I did that with my father. And what I found with my father is the same thing that Putin and Kim Jong-un found out about Donald Trump. And that is, they are so easily manipulated. It's all about them. It's about the grandeur heaped upon him. And that was the thing that caused them to be so malleable. That's how it was with my father. If I would see he was getting angry, all I had to do was try to turn it another direction, make him laugh, compliment him, praise him, whatever. And then all of a sudden that dark shadow that was looming over him and all of us would go away. He'd be distracted and it would be okay, at least for the time being. And that's what Putin and Kim Jong-un and others understand about Donald Trump. He's easily manipulated, and that's exactly what they did. As was said earlier, he is a useful idiot. Now, they talk about Donald Trump being an asset, and we need to clarify that a little bit. I do think he was a Russian asset. I think he's an asset for anybody that wants to manipulate him. But he's not an asset in an intentional or conscious way. I don't think in his mind he says, I want to tear apart the United States. I'm going to be an asset for Russia. That's not what was happening there. He's an asset because he can be easily manipulated. What is being done to make him an asset, he's completely unaware of. He thinks they're his buddies, that they love him. And if you love Donald Trump, he loves you and he'll do anything for you. If you hate Donald Trump, he will hate you back and he will fight you tooth and nail to the extent that he can. So that's what's really going on here. I don't think he has some secret plan with Vladimir Putin to overthrow the government. The point of him overthrowing the government was so he could maintain power. Vladimir Putin was there just to offer some help, which is what he did. Fortunately, both fucking failed. But that's not to suggest it couldn't happen again with Donald Trump or somebody else down the road. There are other people that seem to have close ties with Russia, and Russia is not our friend, never has been, never will be. They see us, as I said before, a hurdle, a stumbling block, whatever you want to call it. The moment they can have a certain amount of control over this country is the moment they win. And for the time when Donald Trump was in office, they did have control. And they wanted to maintain that control, so that's why they tried to help him win the 2020 election. You think Vladimir Putin and Joe Biden are buddies? I guarantee you they're not, because Joe Biden knows how dangerous this fuck is. He's not our friend, no matter how big his smile or what he says. His goal is to bring this country down. And Donald Trump was not bright enough to grasp that. All right, so former New York mayor and former Donald Trump attorney Rudy Giuliani. He's having a few financial difficulties as of late. That's according to his lawyer. He has repeatedly requested compensation from Donald Trump and been unsuccessful. Remember when Rudy was saying that Donald Trump hadn't paid him and he had insurance and all that stuff? Well, it sounds like Donald Trump hasn't paid him much over the years. Giuliani was once worth tens of millions of dollars, according to the Times. He was one of the 19, along with Trump, indicted by Fulton County Superior Court grand jury again on August 1st. CNN reports the former mayor's lawyers said in a filing this month in a civil defamation case brought by two Georgia election workers, you know them, a mom and a daughter, that he needs more time to pay attorney's fees and would like the opportunity to seek an extension from the court. Excuse me. Now, he's running out of money. He likes to spend money, and he's spend more than's coming in. So he's in fucking trouble. Now, the news outlet also notes, on top of facing hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal bills and sanctions, Giuliani's financial situation is likely to become even more difficult to navigate in the coming days as he faces potentially perilous court decisions against him in those two lawsuits. Now, according to the New York Times, the former GOP lawmaker's lawyer and even his son Andrew have made personal appeals to Trump in hope of getting his father's huge legal bills covered. He's begging Donald Trump, and I got to tell you, if you want money, if you're desperate for money and you need to go to Donald Trump, you're in some deep fucking trouble, because we know that Donald Trump doesn't help anybody but himself. People close to the former mayor argue he was not working strictly on lawsuits, but also on research and efforts to keep state legislators from certifying results. Mr. Giuliani insisted were false, but Trump told aides he didn't want Mr. Giuliani to receive a dime unless he succeeded. Some of Mr. Giuliani's expenses were eventually paid, but only after Mr. Trump personally approved the money. That's the interesting thing about Donald Trump. He said the same thing about his lawyers. Yeah, he'll pay his lawyers if they win the case. Well, the lawyers know they don't have a chance to win the case. So they were ready to walk and say, fuck it. So in that case, in this situation, Donald Trump has to pay up front. Otherwise, they walk. Donald Trump doesn't like it, but it's the only option he has currently. Now, according to the report, Mr. Trump's Political Action Committee, which has doled out like $40 million in legal fees, primarily for Mr. Trump, but also a number of other people connected to the investigation. He's paying those people's legal fees so they keep their mouths shut. But he has so far covered only $340,000 of Mr. Giuliani, a payment made in late May. So Rudy hasn't been paid since late May, and we are in mid-August now. He's paid some things, but $340,000 for the last couple of years, maybe 3 years of representing Donald Trump and doing everything he can to overthrow an election, and he only gets $340,000. Well, you can understand why Rudy Giuliani's in a bit of trouble. Over and above not getting paid, he's also getting sued. He's having to pay lawyers. I don't know how this guy still exists. He's going to sell his home, an apartment in New York, which is worth like $6 million. And that'll be fine, but he's got to find a place to live. And that $6 million is only going to last so long when you're paying for high-priced legal advice. I don't know what's going to happen with Rudy, but the dam's got to break eventually. Once he runs out of money, then what is he to do? Nobody's going to feel sorry for him. Nobody's going to give him money. He's going to crash and burn, just like I suggested Donald Trump will do, and some of the others will do the same. Now, Donald Trump is not supposed to be talking, right? He's not supposed to be talking shit about witnesses or potential witnesses in his case in Washington, D.C. But on Saturday, he mentioned that Georgia Governor Brian Kemp was meeting with other Republican presidential contenders, sarcastically calling such a meeting a beautiful reunion. Trump, who was recently reported, was a bit unhinged, and all you have to do is watch some of the video. You can see that motherfucker is unhinged. And they were saying that he was pretty unhinged toward the end of his presidency, too. He did not want to leave, and he was going to be made to leave. And he was freaking out a little bit, as you might expect. Now, in Truth Social, it was said that indisputably got elected Kemp, Mike Pence, and Ron DeSantis. So Donald Trump is saying he's the reason they got elected to their offices. Brian Kemp, Mike Pence, and Ron DeSantis. Earlier in the day, Trump was complaining about the time and expense the criminal indictments were costing him. Yeah, I'll bet that's troubling. How much time you got to go in and out of court and worry about things and meetings, and then all the money that's hemorrhaging from your accounts. Yeah, I'm sure that's a problem, but here's the deal, Donnie. If you don't like to have to pay these bills or take this time, don't commit the crimes. That's really the best, most proactive way to handle this, Donnie. But to no avail, Donnie is still fucking around, and he will continue to find out. Now, in his most recent posts, the former president appears to be responding to news reports that DeSantis had a secret meeting with Kemp. Why would Kemp even bother? That's a joke. Donald Trump went on to say, how nice, a really beautiful reunion. 3 people that I indisputably got elected, 2 governors and a VP. Brian Kemp of Georgia, Mike Pence of Indiana, and Ron DeSanctimonious of Florida just met, most likely to talk about the weather or perhaps to discuss how they can stop the weaponization of Georgia law, working with the DOJ and others against their absolutely all-time favorite president, me. Trump wrote on his own social media network. All three have been just wonderful, so loyal and nice. It's great to have friends like this. I don't know. Did you sense some sarcasm in that? Yeah, Donald Trump is seeing that people are having get togethers and meetings without him, and he's a little paranoid at this point. Paranoia is part of the problem, part of the symptoms of narcissism. And you can bet this motherfucker's paranoid. That's why I think this Wednesday is going to be interesting. We've got the Republican debate on Wednesday, and he says he's not going. Instead, apparently he's going to do a little interview with Tucker Carlson on Twitter or X. So, and of course, nobody's going to watch that. He's not going to be able to pull the attention he hopes to pull to distract from the debate. It's just not going to happen that way. But he's going to try it nonetheless. But if he's worried about these secret meetings or these one-on-ones or three-on-ones or whatever these meetings are, you know it's going to get worse. Because as more and more people fall away, Donald Trump is going to feel the pressure. There is no question about that. He's going to feel the pressure and he won't be able to handle it. See, the one thing a narcissist must do is control everything. He does it by manipulation or by bullying or by yelling or by threatening. And when that doesn't work anymore, then he's got a problem because that's all he's got in his toolbox. That's all he knows how to do. So then it's going to amount to freaking out, doing crazy things, saying crazy things like we're seeing now. But I'm wondering if he's so paranoid about this, isn't it going to fuck with him a little bit when it comes to the debate? All these people that are running against him will be talking shit about him. It'll be easier for them to talk shit about him if he's not going to be there. And I know that is going to fuck with his head. So I'm still questioning whether or not he shows up at the debate. That's so Donald Trump to say, I'm going to be at Tucker Carlson, and then at the last minute show up in Milwaukee for this debate. It's going to be hard not to see him coming. He's very ostentatious about his entourage and his Trump plane. So if he does go to Milwaukee, everybody will know about it in advance. There will be no surprise. But I'm still not sure he won't show up. This is a tough thing for Donald Trump to have other people talking about him and him not being able to fight back. We'll see what happens Wednesday. But either way, I'm going to watch it. If Donald Trump's there, I'll be particularly excited watching him and Chris Christie square off while Ron DeSantis stands there with his dick in his hand, not knowing what to do. And when he does do something, he embarrasses himself. Or if Donald Trump doesn't show up, it'll be interesting to see what these other candidates have to say about Donald Trump. We already know one strategy that came out about Ron DeSantis, and he's talking about defending Donald Trump. And how does that make sense if that's your opponent? You're going to defend Donald Trump? That's not going to work out well either. And as I've said before, this may be the end game for Ron DeSantis. Once he's at this debate, if he goes as badly as I think it might, he might be just fucking done or close to done as far as a candidate for the presidency of the United States. All right, we are going to wrap up the Rational Boomer podcast. I want to thank you all for taking the time out of your day to listen. I hope you have a great day, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.